Is there anything that you can tell me regarding the recovery process for Severino and Hicks who are recovering from Tommy John?
No, Severino's in the very early stages right now, so I think Tommy John is typically a 12 to 18-month process. So, especially for a pitcher, it's shorter for a position player. So Hicks, he's already started physical therapy. He's at home in Arizona, so he's throwing a little bit. He's been swinging a regular bat, a fungo bat. So I think the last time I talked to Aaron was during spring training before everything shut down, obviously here, and he was I asked him about Didi Gregorius' timetable from last year when Didi came back in basically June. And Hicks told me that, yeah, that would be great. But Didi also had basically a perfect rehab. So that's like the best case scenario. So I would think that if we have a regular season, a normal baseball season, Hicks would be back sometime in July. And now when opening day is, who knows? But I think July is most likely. June would be the best case scenario. Severino is going to be out for the entire year. So he'll spend this whole year. He's still here in Tampa rehabbing. So he's over at the stadium, kind of working out a little, but he hasn't resumed throwing yet. It takes a little while longer. But the hope is that he would be ready, if not for opening day, but early next season.
Perfect. And then a little bit more into the injuries. Aaron Judge with the fractured rib, right, or the stress fracture rib. How's his recovery process going?
It's going. They're taking advantage of the time here that he's able to shut it down and basically get the rest that he didn't allow himself after the season last year. He talked to us when we were down here about how he was so mad at the outcome of the 2019 season and losing to Houston in the playoffs that he never really gave himself a rest. He went right back in the cages, started working out, and that worked against him because he came down here and it wasn't long before he had to shut it down. And so none of us knew that he was dealing with a fractured rib. It's crazy to think that he played through the entire postseason with that. I'm sure he took a lot of painkillers and was able to stay on the field, but not giving himself that time to kind of rest and recover, I think really set him back. The good news, I guess the silver lining in all this is that Judge and several other guys on that team are going to be able to come back healthy where they wouldn't have been ready for opening day otherwise.
Right. Kind of along that line too. I know Paxton's got back surgery. Stanton with the calf strains or whatever's really going on with the right side of his body. Sanchez had reported back soreness in March. How are all those guys doing?
That seems like 100 years ago when we talked about Gary Sanchez having the flu and back soreness. Yeah, I mean, he's recovered from that. Stanton would have probably been ready to play right now if there were games going on. I think that somewhere around the first or second week of April, he would have gone on a minor league rehab and rejoined the team. So he's ready to go pretty much. Paxton, I think, just completed his 5th bullpen session. He's at home in Wisconsin, so he's throwing. The last time I talked to James, his best case, his target was somewhere starting big league games somewhere in the middle of May. That was before this all happened and everything shut down. But I would think that middle of May, June, somewhere, that's all realistic for Paxton. And depending on how this goes, I think that that's a good shot. He's ready for the beginning of the season.
Perfect. Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of the injury woes that happened during the offseason are starting to heal themselves a little bit, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I think that a lot of this was a hangover effect from last year. If you look back at all these injuries, the only kind of new one was Stanton with the calf strain. Everything else kind of traced back to last year. Severino traced back to the playoffs. Paxton traced back to September. Judge to September. So a lot of this was still a hangover from last season. And, like I said, the silver lining is they're using this time to get healthy and get over it. And Hicks will be ready at some point. That was obviously an injury from last season as well. So, they're using this time to their advantage as much as they can.
Yeah, that's really good to hear, especially after having 30+ people on the IL.
Craziest season I ever cut. Well, I guess this will probably be the craziest season, but that was nuts. Just having 30 players on the IL, 39 stints, both major league records. I get very familiar with writing injury updates last year, and that continued into spring training until they shut it down.
Right. So hopefully it'll be a good time for all these guys to get healthy and have a full team on the field.
Totally.
Did you see Gio Urshela having such a big season when he finally got the opportunity?
No. No. I mean, when they traded for him, that was a very under-the-radar deal. It was sometime in August of 2018. I mean, they bought him for $25,000 from the Blue Jays. Nobody paid that much mind, and he didn't do a whole lot during that month at AAA that really said, wow, the Yankees have something here. nobody really saw that coming. I mean, he was in spring training in 2019 with the Yankees, and I don't think we talked to him very much at all. I mean, nobody saw this coming. I maybe spoke to him once or twice during spring training, but it wasn't like, this is a guy, because the Yankees had their chips in on Miguel Andujar. I mean, coming off a year where he was second in the Rookie of the Year, that was the talk of spring training in 2019. And, unfortunately for Andujar, he got hurt, and that's what Urshela needed. He needed that opportunity, because with Andujar healthy, he never would have got that shot in New York. So, no, I don't think anybody saw it coming. Credit to Brian Cashman and his front office. I mean, they've done a really good job of finding guys who are undervalued by other teams. Not just Urshela, but Mike Tauchman, Luke Voigt, I would point to as a couple of other guys there who, when the Yankees made those trades, nobody was saying, oh, good, the Yankees got Mike Tauchman. But he turned into being a really important part of this team. Luke Voigt, same thing. I remember having to look up Luke Voigt and saying, who is this guy? And, now everybody knows who Luke Voigt is. So, Cashman, to his credit, they're really good at, look, they can write the big check for Garrett Cole, but they're really good at finding value out there, even from what other teams aren't seeing in their own organizations. And I think that's a credit to Cashman and this army of scouts and analysts that he has. I mean, they've got 2-3 dozen guys there who are just running the numbers and can find guys like a Gio Urshela. They're not all going to work out, but all you got to do is hit one.
So far, a lot of them have worked out with the guys that you mentioned, Boyd, Talkman, all those guys. I mean, yeah, credit to Cashman.
We've come a long way from when everybody insisted, oh, you got to play Ben Francisco. He's going to be really good, and then it just didn't happen. I mean, there's a couple of swings and misses that they've had, but look, if you hit on Urshela, Tauchman, Voigt, I mean, you're doing pretty good.
Oh yeah, that actually brings me to another question. So with Andujar having his great season before being injured, and now Urshela having another great season, whose position is third base to lose?
I think it's still Urshela's to lose. I think Cashman has talked about that a lot. Boone has too. I mean, it's through no fault of Andujar's, but, he's got to come back and prove that he's healthy and can take on the job. And he was doing a good job of that this spring training. I think that the best thing that worked in Andujar's favor was that he was so willing to come in and try out left field, try first base, just improve his versatility, because he needs an opportunity to get that bat in the lineup. And, depending on how the lineup looked when the season started, he probably would have gotten a lot of reps at DH until Stanton got back. So there was going to be a spot for Andujar on this team. I think there still will be. But I think that defensively, Urshela is a better defender than Andujar. I think the bat is better for Andujar when he's healthy, when he's right, but he's got to come back and prove that now. But I think that, Andujar is 24 years old. I mean, he's got a world of future ahead of him, a very bright future. And I think the Yankees are going to give him a shot to prove he can stick in that lineup, whether it's at third base, whether it's in left field, whether it's DH. I think they can use him. He's got the talent for it.
Perfect. Another kind of question with flooded positions is that outfield is flooded with Judge, Hicks, Gardner, Stanton, Frazier, Florial. Go on and on. Even Wade and Andujar can play outfield now. So what's the Yankees' plan with this outfield, with having so many, especially with like Hicks, who's now under contract for several years, Gardner's on there for 1 year, Stanton's obviously got that massive contract. What's the plan kind of in the outfield?
I think you're looking at it as far as this year goes. You feel bad for a guy like Clint Frazier, who had a really good spring training. He needed a couple guys to get hurt to get that opportunity. It looked like he was going to get that chance, and now with the shutdown, that chance has kind of been ripped away from him. So I think they're pretty locked in without injuries. You're going to have Brett Gardner in left field. Eventually, you'll have Hicks in center. Gardner can play center until Hicks comes back. Judge is entrenched in right field if he's healthy when things get started. And Stanton, they'd like to see play some defense. I think most of his reps are going to come at DH, but they want to see him play some left field, maybe some right field if they need it, I guess. And so, with those guys there, Tauchman can defend all three positions. He's got a center fielder's glove, so he's a plus defender. And, I think that at some point Frazier will get that chance as well. I think the bat will play in the big leagues. He showed that in the first half last year, but he needs an opportunity. And as you said, the Yankees are pretty flooded in the outfield. So, I think we mentioned 5 or 6 guys right there, and we didn't even talk about a Florial who's knocking on the door. And he needs to put together a healthy year and strike out less. But, there's a reason people are so excited about him too. So, yeah, they are certainly not lacking for outfield depth, put it that way.
Is there any chance that they might consider trading one of these outfielders like Frazier or Florio for, I don't know, maybe another starting pitcher or some bullpen help?
Yeah. I think there's always a chance. I think that's the one good thing about Cashman is that his job is to listen, and he's not shy about saying that. I think that what he always says is, I don't have any untouchables. What I have is players who are less touchable than others. And so teams were trying to get Clint Frazier during the offseason, and the Yankees were listening to that, but they decided that they valued him more in their system than what they could get for him outside. I mean, especially coming off a year where I think Clint would say it didn't go the way he wanted it to. He wound up back in AAA and had the defensive troubles. And so, look, he's got value. The Yankees know that. Other teams know that. There's a reason he was so touted, but I don't see where he fits right now. But I think that was based off a 26-man roster. I think that the realistic outcome of all this is we're probably going to see rosters that are bigger than 26 if we play this year. And so I think that he will be on that big league roster. I think that whether it's 27, 28, 29, 30, you're going to need those guys because you're going to be playing a lot of double headers. You're going to be trying to cram in as many games as you can. And so I think that going with just 26, plus we don't know what the minor league feeder system is going to look like. So there's a lot of questions right now. But in a guy like Clint, I think that he's got a shot to make an impact on this team, and he'll find some playing time somehow.
Perfect. A couple more questions. How are Boone and Blake staying in touch with their players? I know Boone's been in contact with Cole. Mm-hmm. Cole's been doing bullpens with his wife. I also read that Blake's been in contact with a lot of his pitching staff. Are there any updates that you can give me on that?
Yeah, Blake and Mike Harkey and a lot of the strength and conditioning guys, they're kind of keeping in touch. They're doing Zoom calls, a lot of text messages like they would during the off season. They've got a Google sheet set up where, for example, if Zach Britton goes and throws the bullpen, when he gets done with it, he goes and puts it in the sheet. Today threw bullpen 20 pitches. And so that way they can kind of keep track of everybody. And the other pitchers can look at what the other pitchers are doing and kind of say, oh, maybe that's something I should be doing. Am I keeping up? Am I falling behind? And so the problem with this is that we don't know what the start date is. And so when guys go through their offseason program, they gear it a lot of times to saying, all right, I'm going to get to Tampa on February 5, and then I'm going to start from there. And so I want to be built up for that. We don't know what the start date is here. So you don't want to build up and build up and build up with no kind of start date in sight. So once Major League Baseball can kind of give more clarification, and once we all know where this is headed, I think that'll ramp up. But guys are trying to keep their arms in shape, and they're doing Zoom calls, team-wide Zoom calls. They did one last week where it was just kind of an opportunity for Boone to address any questions, pass along any information he had, and just kind of keep in touch, see each other's faces, but keep those lines of communication open, which I think is important in these kind of uncertain times.
Yeah, very much. I'm glad to hear that Boone and the rest of the staff are really making an effort to communicate with the players. Yeah. This probably isn't the most timely question, but before all this happened, were there any discussions regarding extensions for DJ or Judge, Torres, Sanchez, any of those guys?
Not much. I remember we talked to LeMahieu about that in February, and he said there had been no contact between his camp and the Yankees. And, they've got some other free agents pending here too. Paxton is going to be a free agent. Tanaka can be a free agent after this year. So it's not as dire as, say, the Dodgers, who traded for Mookie Betts and now don't know for sure if they're going to get a game out of him. But I think that, look, based on last year, LeMahieu would be my top priority. I would want to keep that guy. I think he's just a solid all-around competitor. I think he fits into this team. I really liked having that up the middle of LeMahieu at second and Glaber at short. I thought that was going to be a good double play combination. I hope we'll still see it this year. But yeah, I think that based on last year where DJ was their MVP, and even Aaron Boone said that, and a few other guys on the team said that too, hard to let that guy walk. So I would expect that at some point here, it's obviously not the first priority. The first priority is getting these guys back on the field and trying to figure out what the season looks like. But I don't think you want to see DJ LeMahieu in another uniform, and I don't think the Yankees do either. So I would expect they're going to at least try and find out what it would take to keep him, because I think he would like to stay.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially after last season, I think he deserves a good amount of money for it.
Yeah. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. A couple more questions I have. So what else do the Yankees really need to do to win the World Series this year or even next year? Are there any
get back on the field, play some games? Yeah. I mean, this was the team to beat, I thought. Look, they got Garrett Cole. their one kind of Achilles heel, so to speak, last year. Everybody said, well, they don't have a starting pitching. So they went out and they got Cole. And it's kind of a double whammy because you added one of the best pitchers in the game and you took them away from the Astros, the team that knocked you out. And so I thought that was just a win all around, and was really looking forward to seeing what he was going to do in a Yankee uniform. And look, we'll see it eventually. I mean, he's here for 9 years. I just don't know when it's going to start this year. I think that I really like the rotation with Cole, Tanaka, Happ will be in there. Jordan Montgomery really impressed me this spring. You're going to have Paxton back as well at some point. And Jonathan Loaisiga looked good in spring training. So I think the questions about the starting rotation have been answered in my view. The bullpen took a hit by losing Dellin Betances to the Mets, but you can't really miss what you didn't have, and they barely had him at all last year. So they've got essentially the same bullpen as they did last year, and that lineup's going to score a ton of runs. So, look, what could hurt the Yankees is health. And, even though last year they were hurt historically, they still won 103 games. So imagine if they stayed healthy. So I think the only thing that can really hurt the Yankees is keeping these guys on the field, getting them to stay healthy, and of course, playing games, because we're going to be looking at a shortened season here. And so any losing streak of 4 or 5 or 6 games is going to hurt a lot more than it would over a 162. So whether it's 80, 100, whatever it winds up being, everything's going to be magnified this year. And so that's going to be the biggest key, is to stay out of those losing streaks and just keep everything pointing in the right direction, because I think this is the best team in the American League East, and I would argue they could be the best team in the American League.
Cool. I think I only have about 2 or 3 more questions for you if you have time.
Sure.
You mentioned Montgomery really impressed in spring training. I know he's coming off of Tommy John surgery, correct?
Right.
Do the Yankees have a plan to monitor his workload in this year, in the shortened season, or even the next year?
I think he kind of went through a little bit of that last year, which is why it was good to see him go through the minors, come back, pitch at the big league level a little bit. I'm sure they're not going to send him out there for 200 innings, but considering we're dealing with a shortened season, I don't think anybody's going to get close to 200 innings anyway. So I think he can, considering we're probably looking at a 3-4 month season at best, he could probably go full bore without any restrictions. You remember last year, Domingo Germán had some kind of restrictions, and obviously it didn't wind up mattering because, Germán did what he did. But they were watching that closely. And I would imagine he'd probably be on the same path as Germán was, where they were kind of right around that 150, 160 would have been the danger zone for him. I don't think that Montgomery's even going to get close to that. So I don't really consider it a concern for this year.
Okay. And then considering that with the shortened season, about 100, 120 innings or so, then there shouldn't be too many restrictions, if any, at all, the following season.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it's so far down the road that I haven't actually asked that question of anybody, but I think that, typically you're worried when pitchers get over 180, especially coming over off Tommy John, even if you want to call it 160. I don't think that's going to really be a factor. And so he should be pretty good to go.
You mentioned it too, that you think that the Yankees can be on top of the AL East and the entire AL, which I obviously think so as well. But who do you think is the biggest threat to dethrone those guys?
I think Houston has to be, the defending champions are always the team to beat, I think. And so, but like I said, they're not as strong as they were last year. Losing Cole is going to hurt that team. And before baseball shut down, they were having a rough go here in spring training. They were hearing it from the fans. And I do wonder what the fallout will be when we do come back from this, because even in February and March, which is kind of like the sunny, happy, glass full and half full games, they were hearing boos from crowds of 5,000-6,000 people. Like, I was curious to find out what it was going to be like when they get up to Yankee Stadium and like what that reception was going to be like. And I remember telling somebody that is going to be the most miserable 100-win team that we've ever seen. And obviously the schedule is going to be shorter now, but I don't think that team was going to have a whole lot of fun. I think they were going to have to wear it for the entire year. And so I do wonder what the ripple effect of that will be. Will these guys kind of roll over and say, all right, everybody hates us, and they're not as good a team, or was it going to fire them up and get them out there to really go for it? I kind of bet on the latter. I think that, teams can use that as motivation, but the landscape has changed so much now that I don't know exactly what it's going to be like when they do come back. Is everybody's just going to be so happy to see baseball back that we kind of forget about it? I tend to doubt it, but I mean, I guess we'll see. Tampa Bay, I think their starting pitching was on par with the Yankees. I think that they can go toe-to-toe with the Yankees, and that was going to be a good division race. I think it still will be. That's a pretty good team that I think doesn't get enough credit. I think that with Boston taking a step back, Toronto is still growing, getting that experience. Baltimore, you can pretty much write them off as a rebuilding team again. But I think that New York and Tampa Bay were going to be in a good race for the top spot. And they gave the Yankees a lot of trouble last year head-to-head. And so I thought that was going to be a good division race. And then as far as playoffs go, I was kind of figuring the Yankees will have to go through Houston at some point and get past them if they're going to get to the World Series.
Right. Where do you see Herman kind of fitting into the bullpen starting rotation when he does finally become eligible to return?
Yeah, I mean, that's the tricky thing here is that he's looking at 63 games. So if there is a season this year, he's got to sit out for 63 games. And now what happens if the season is only 70 games or something? Like, he's pretty much a non-factor there. So the good news, I guess, for him is that if there is no season next year, he can come back and be completely ready to go. And but yeah, he's still got to serve that suspension. And so this is something that none of us ever anticipated. I think that if the schedule went as it was supposed to, he would have been back the first week in June. But now we're looking at what, July, August, maybe? So September. So who knows? I think that given that, it's hard to look at him coming back as a starting pitcher. I think you have to just think of him as a reliever because you're just not – you would have the time to build him up, but who's he going to pitch against? So I think that if they can get him back up to throw 25, 30 pitches, look, I think he could be dynamic out of the bullpen. I think that it's going to be pretty much a lost year for him, and so he'll be fortunate to get whatever innings he can, I think. And I think for 2021, you can come back and think of him more as a starting pitcher.
Cool. And finally, the last question that I really wanted to ask you, what were your thoughts on the Red Sox report that came out yesterday?
Yeah, I read through it. I think considering we heard for 6 weeks that they weren't going to get hit with very much, I didn't think it was going to be on the level as the Astros situation. And so, I'll just echo what Aaron Boone said yesterday, in that who knows really what was going on behind the scenes there. But I do trust that Major League Baseball did a very thorough investigation. Look, I mean, it took forever to get it done. And I'm sure that's because there were kind of pieces that they had to keep going back over with different witnesses. I know that they talked to several people multiple times to clarify different things. And so I don't really get too bent out of shape about it. Look, I think that from a Yankee perspective, here's what you need to know is that the two teams that ended the Yankee season in 2017 and 2018 have both been penalized by Major League Baseball for infractions in the rule book. And if I'm Aaron Judge or any of these guys who are still waiting to get to their first World Series, that really sticks to me. And so Judge was pissed. He was pissed about the Astros. A lot of guys in that room were pissed about the Astros. I suspect that they're not pleased about the Red Sox thing either, but I don't think that it's as blatant as the Astros situation was. And so, but there's no way around it. Yeah, those two teams who ended their season have been disciplined. So if I'm the Yankees, I'm not happy about that at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I mean, I can only imagine what the Dodger fans are going through.
Exactly. Yeah. They're in the same boat. So the Yankees and Dodgers fans, I think they're kind of simpatico there. They're on the same ground. And, I feel almost like we were robbed of seeing a Yankee-Dodger World Series back-to-back years. I think it's possible. None of us know for sure. And I don't think that what the Red Sox did, like I said, was as drastic, but we'll never know. And so that's what hurts.
Yeah, is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you would like to mention that you think is important for readers to know?
That's a good question. I've used that myself. No, I think that this is just kind of reinforced to me how important baseball is to so many people. And obviously this is not the most important thing going on in the world today. And but as soon as the federal and state governments tell us that we can get back to action, I think it's going to be a really positive thing for the country to see games, even if it has to start without fans in the stands. I think that it's going to be the first step toward getting us back to normalcy. And, this is a role that baseball has served in years past. After 9/11, I lived through that. World War II, baseball was instrumental then too. So I think it's going to be very similar to that, and it's going to help with the healing. And so I think that it's important for the players and the teams to get back out there. And, as somebody who covers this sport, I'm going to be proud to be part of that.